So, okay, great. So I think we'll get started if we may. We've got a great program again to hear about some fantastic updates of work that's been ongoing and new. So we'll go straight to Lucy, if we could, please.
Hi, everybody. Just checking that you can hear me.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, afternoon. My name is Lucy. Thanks for the introduction. I've been a dietitian at the Trust for 18 years, and today I'm pleased to present a LIM project on behalf of the dietetic team. My journey began with the dietetic manager's aim to standardise dietetic documentation across LTHT using the British Dietetic Association model and process format. For background, the diagram explains the stages in the BDA model and process, starting with identification of nutritional need or at the point of referral to our service. We would then assess the nutritional issues and formulate a nutrition and dietetic diagnosis made up from problem, etiology, signs and symptoms. From this, we would propose a dietetic outcomes and goals in collaboration with the service user. The proposed actions would be implemented. We would then monitor, review and evaluate. At the centre of all this would be our service user. So, problem and challenges. Prior to moving to electronic documentation, LTHT dietitians used a paper record with pre-printed headings. This style made it quite easy to see strategies that had already been tried and if there'd been an improvement. Following the move to electronic documentation, the PPM Plus form became essentially free text. And in a large department broken down into smaller teams, the free text style led to a huge variation in the way things were documented. Problems occurred when we received feedback from learners. They found moving between teams difficult as documentation styles varied and they would have to spend time adapting. This was not value added to patient care. To save time with documentation, dietitians started cutting and pasting notes from other healthcare professional entries, for example, the past medical history. But this can lead to errors and does not demonstrate the dietitian's understanding of the clinical situation. The entries became longer and were difficult to follow when a service user transferred or the notes were being reviewed. Also, as a department, we need to keep up with university teaching with regards to documentation. It's difficult to support learners when not familiar with the model and process format being taught. Task and finish group discussed the different options and it was agreed a standard operating procedure would be useful, which included a template for dietetic documentation. I developed template A and a colleague template B. A was selected and I went on to write the SOP. I spent a lot of time in meetings, answering questions and providing support. This is when I realised what a huge undertaking this project was. I was representing the department, but as the only person with an in-depth knowledge of the template. So I started looking at wastes associated with documentation. For example, over-processing by copying information already held on the care record, overproduction when including irrelevant sections of the template, defects when cutting and pasting errors that are already there. After the template was piloted, we ended up with an unintentional lengthy document, so we'd gone full circle. It was time to refocus on a smaller part of the project. Coincidentally, a project with adult therapy started. This was going for goals, which tied in with a section of the template that you can see on the screen. The Going for Goals team audited prior to the new template and found that only 3% of dietetic entries had a goal. When re-audited following implementation of the template, this increased to 86%. I don't take credit for this. It's all thanks to the hard work of the clinical teams. So what went well? Engaging with staff to gain support, connecting with the right people, for example, the Going for Goals team, perseverance. I could have changed my LIM project to something much easier, but I stuck with it. And what would I do differently? I would absolutely start smaller. And I did have help along the way, but I would definitely seek out more allies. And my plans for the future are to complete the larger project within the next 6 months. I'm working with the British Dietetic Association digital team as they attempt to develop a standardised template for dietetic documentation across the profession. And I'm also involved in the next Going for Goals audit. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lucy. Great for that. Great for sticking to time. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, but we will hold those questions if you've got them till the end, and we'll carry on with our presentations if we may. So next we're coming to Natalie, I think.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Natalie. I'm one of the respiratory specialist physios on the respiratory support unit at St James's. Bear with me, my throat is very sore today, so my voice isn't great. So my project that I used the Leeds improvement method for was to help me with looking at whether laryngectomy and tracheostomy cares are meeting national guidelines. The RSU at St James's is having a much larger number of tracheostomies and laryngectomy patients in the recent years, and these patients have altered airways, and we are finding that they are high risk with safety. The airway management needs to be closely monitored. Last year we had several incidents where these patients were potentially in situations that could have caused compromise to their airways. So we highlighted these as safety incidents. And on the back of that, we looked into what national guidelines there were, and therefore we decided to audit against the National Tracheostomy Safety Project guidelines that were already standardised in the country, to make sure that we were helping healthcare professionals provide safe care. The biggest issue that we found was there was really no standardisation of documentation for these patients. It was very ad hoc. Things were written on, we still have paper OBS charts on RSU. They were still being written there. Every staff member was doing it in a slightly different way. Some were using the tracheostomy booklets. But actually, even the tracheostomy booklets didn't align with the national standards. So there was real big discrepancies there. So what we decided to do was to audit whether we felt that whether they were meeting the guidelines, highlight any gaps in the care and any documentation which needed further education, and ultimately our goal is to improve patient safety. So we first did the audit around May last year to establish kind of the level of the problem, and then the PDSA cycle was then used to guide our improvement. So the problem that we found after that first initial audit was only 26% of the trache and laryngectomy cares carried out were carried out and documented. There may have been a greater number carried out, but because there was no documentation, we couldn't prove anything. We spoke to people that were involved with these cares, mainly the nurses and the physios are the people involved with that, but there may be other people on the ward, the doctors that need to know how much suctioning, for example, when recent cares were done. And what we did on the back of that original audit is putting in a new observation chart. It wasn't ideal because it's another piece of paper for people to fill in. However, it really allowed and prompted staff to fill in and prompted when different cares needed to be done. So that was put in, and then what we did was we re-audited after a few weeks, and we also created a prompt sheet which was basically put up on the patient's door, again just to prompt everybody to make sure that the cares are carried out and documented. So we predicted that there would be an improved documentation of cares, and there was. We had a huge improvement. The whole team engaged really well to the changes, and many of the staff hadn't actually been aware that there were problems or there were even guidelines that we should be documenting against. But once this has been involved, the staff, once that was highlighted, the staff have actually got really on board with this. They're really keen to learn, and we saw an improvement from 26 to 75% after a re-audit in the and how the cares were documented. So yeah, as I said there was a huge improvement in the compliance of carrying out the cares. We still found that there were several areas where there's work to be done. Things like making sure emergency equipment is available in the rooms. This has been checked. I think it's another one of those that we know it's there, and I go into the rooms and I see the equipment there. However, a nurse per shift has not been checking it off. So we've re-altered the sheets slightly just to try and get them to do a tick every shift. The nursing staff, the kind of confidence in looking after these patients has massively improved. People feel that they really understand more about why these checks need to be taking place, and the importance of documenting it. We still use the observation chart and the prompt sheet for every patient. And in the future, what we are hoping to do is absorb the tracheostomy observations into the RSU observation chart, so there's not another piece of paper. And hopefully in the future, we might head towards an EOBS, but this is a bigger project that needs ongoing, getting everything transferred over onto EOBS. So a significant improvement was seen. That went really well. Engagement was great. It's helped us highlight areas that we still want to improve more, and it's got us working on training sessions that the physios, the nurses on there, and the education nurses are going to be putting training sessions on going forwards. Other than that one slight modification, nothing else was needed to be done, just regarding the emergency tick box. We didn't need to do anything else, and we have continued to use it to really good effect. In the future, I'd like to use other aspects maybe of the LIM course to help support the PDSA cycle. I kind of started the LIM training partway through this project, so it was kind of a little bit of a backwards of how I could put this into use. There is a wider tracheostomy collab within the trust, which we are hoping to build upon what we've done already on RSU and make things trust-wide, so there's standardised care across the trust. And that we've said there that when it comes to patient safety, it really is sometimes just a small change can get such a big improvement, and getting compliance is the big key there. So we plan to repeat the audit this year, make sure staff are continuing to engage. We've got training planned, and some big projects with the tracheostomy audit collab. Sorry. Thank you. I think that might be everything.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Natalie. Really great presentation. Again, lots of inspirational stuff that's gone on there, and I'm sure there'll be questions at the end, but I'll keep us moving in the interest of time. So hoping, Alexandra, you're with us to take us through your virtual Huddle board.
Yep. So hi, my name's Alexandra Sawyer. I'm one of the senior sisters on J54, which is the ICU at St James's. So today I'm going to talk about the virtual Huddle board and my journey through the LIM course. Challenges I was looking at was a need for a positive office space, reducing the stressful environment of that office space, communication, standard work, and my own mental valleys. So what I mean about my own mental valleys is that I knew a bit about LIM before I started the course, before I started this project, and I had already decided what the problem was and how I was going to solve it before I had even sort of entered. I started, jumped in, and I've 5S'd the office space. On the left hand side you can see this is what the office was like, and the middle and the right one are sort of what it looks like after. And this was I started with this because in the middle, you can see on the right hand side there's a board, and I was going to do a production board on there. I'd heard a lot about them, thought they were great, and that's how I was going to solve some of my problems. So I'd engaged the Band 7 team. That helps with mutual ownership, and we'd tidied this space, then the next stage I was going to work on was this production board. As I started actually going through the Leeds improvement method, you know, things sort of changed and developed. Katie, my mentor, was great. And so the next stage was for me how we were going to utilise this space and how we were going to communicate effectively. So as I said, earlier thoughts had already jumped, we were going to do a production board. And I looked to measure communication within the team, and I utilised the Perfect Ward newsletter that we do. It's quite standard for a lot of us. And I used the spaghetti diagram initially and found this was not quite the right tool to measure this. Though it's got merit in its own right, I used a process flowchart, and actually that worked really well, and it was a really good tool. It took me 73 minutes to complete the Perfect Ward newsletter, and that was notably due to 4 interruptions, which totaled 36 minutes. And after that, it still wasn't necessarily completed. I had to email the senior team sort of around me to see what other projects were going on to add to this newsletter. And this sort of led me to thinking a bit more in depth about actually communication on our unit and how that goes forward. We're a sister team of 37 individuals. And as you can imagine, that's a really large team. There's 9 band 7s and the others are sort of band 6s. So the LIM course always promotes that openness to development, to changing, and to sort of breaking down your own mental valleys using PDSA cycles. So I was looking at actually, this production board that was my answer to everything. Is it the answer? And actually I engaged the sisters through band 6 and 7 meetings, face-to-face talks, emails, and I did sort of Google Jamboards, lots of different platforms to try and get some feedback about what was actually needed. And from this, the virtual Huddle board idea took root. The virtual Huddle board was sort of a visual change which colleagues could see, helps with engagement. I enjoyed engaging face to face, and they enjoyed that, sort of not in an informal way. And the virtual Huddle board is basically a daily management tool, and this is something that evolved from a template that was shared with me. So this is a screenshot of how it looks, but I did have a look at different electronic templates that we could use to help, like there's Trello, there's Teams, there's lots and lots, there's Padlet, there's a lot of things out there that you can utilize that are still free. But Excel was a system that people were familiar with, they felt comfortable with. And so what I did was develop this virtual Huddle board, and we utilize it. It's got standard work on there. It's got upstream, downstream. It's all hyperlinked, and it'll take you to the next screen. So it's quite lean, and it will. It's used standard work. It's used the upstream, downstream. So this is sort of problems that are going on the unit. This is the standard work. So this has got the hyperlinks on. We save things on lots of G drives, audits, and it's labelled out sort of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We do lots of different things, and it's a good prompt for the nursing team. This one's out upstream, downstream issues, because we're 37 of us managing the problems. We different shift leaders. This way we've got a log of our issues that are going on, whether that's supplies, and it helps track and helps with communication. On the other sort of one of the other tabs, it has things with the projects, so that will help with the Perfect Ward newsletter. We also have our Perfect Ward board on the unit, but this way it's sort of offering a communication platform that anybody can access at any time on the unit via a computer. The other thing that I did with the daily management tools was I left blank spaces. Now I purposely left blank spaces, and this was so I could develop it and the team could develop it for things that they wanted added. So from the original first draft, there's a access crib sheet, and this is for the senior team to say if logins aren't working or they need access to a certain system. It's got a how-to guide link of where they need to go and what they need to do, or who they need to ask for that access. So essentially it will be there to support the senior team, help with communication, and and offer a platform to do that everybody's got access to. What I would do differently next time is not to predict the idea and be open to that evaluation, that evolution of an idea. I think engaging with the staff was really good, and it's just around continually embedding that within our sort of daily routine. The reason I did screenshots was because it's a live document, and actually when I was showing Katie in my sort of run through, somebody was using it, which was really good. But I think it's just around sort of trying to get that embedded and re-evaluating, using PDSA, continually looking to evolve the project as we go forward.
Fantastic, thank you, Alexandra. Again, really good, some really good stuff there with people engagement. Again, I'm sure lots of comments too, and see lots of applause there. So well done, really good project, really good. Right, so we'll keep moving. Peter, can we come to you?
Yes, of course. Good afternoon, everyone. Pete Aldridge from Operational Estates. What I want to talk to you about this afternoon is the Leeds improvement method work that we've been doing around reactive and planned preventative maintenance within estates. The difference between reactive and planned maintenance is reactive maintenance is when a colleague rings in with a job. It might be the lights have gone out, there's a dripping tap, or it might be something more serious. The planned maintenance is something that usually falls out of a legal requirement. So it may be to do with maintenance of oxygen ports or high voltage electricity. And what we have within estates is a system called K2, which manages that process of distributing and recording the work for us. But during Gemba walks, and particularly the use of production boards, as there were then when this work started, it became clear to me that there was a lot of problems within the system in terms of people's engagement with the K2 works management system, and indeed with people's responsiveness to going out and doing reactive work. And people felt that the K2 system was very clunky. It was stopping us being as reactive as we wanted to be. And on the Gemba walks, I was hearing it from both sides. Managers were telling me that they were spending too much time in the office managing this system, and the workforce out doing the jobs were telling me, well, I go to do one job and it might involve taking a ceiling tile out. I go into the ceiling void to do a job, but I can't put the ceiling tile back in. Somebody else has to come and do that. So what we've got is the managers wanting to be out to manage, the workforce wanting to perform better. And it's this bit in the middle, the K2, that's creating the problem for us. And what I'm seeing on the performance reports that the team are bringing to me on a monthly basis is the actual numbers of jobs within the system isn't going anywhere. So every time people look at it, they get very disillusioned because they're seeing no improvement. So this whole piece of work was around trying to get to the bottom of what was wrong with that using the Leeds improvement method. So the number of jobs open in the system, to us, it affects the quality and the efficiency of the service that we can get. And I'm sure you've all been subject to putting a job in and having to chase it up 2 or 3 times with estates before somebody comes and looks at it. So that was what we was trying to improve. What we did was we split the estates team into different disciplines. So the best way to describe it is we've got the engineering team, which is aligned to anything to do with electricity, water, oxygen, kind of anything that flows through our systems. And then we've got the building team, which is the infrastructure, the fabric, the roofs, the walls. And we picked the building team to look at this piece of work with, to better understand the challenge of making the system better for staff and for estates. As I've said, we use Gemba walks to really focus what the problem was going to be. But actually, we felt that process flow charts were really going to be insightful into this. And we looked at the process from the start to finish. So a ward clerk rings up with a job on a ward. What then happens with that job? Where does it go? When it gets to where it goes, what happens there? How is it distributed? Who distributes it? Where does that job then go? Does the operative then sign that job off? And what's the quality control? And, you know, just going across there with my finger kind of highlights the numbers of steps within that process. And can we make that much more lean and much more meaningful for the operatives and the people that have put the work order in? So the process flow charts were really helpful in us doing that, because when it started off with a load of yellow post-it notes all over a big table up in the estates offices, and we must have had for one job in some examples 32 different post-it notes as we followed that job through the system, and we ultimately got that down to 7, and we don't think 7 is a realistic number of steps in that process. But the process flow chart really helped us sort of get into the detail of that. The team were really engaged in this and understood the need to regain control of the system, because what I said to the team was, if you look at that and you see that it starts off with, and the figures we were looking at was, it started off with 6,000 jobs in the system. We're now down to 3,697, with taking some of those jobs out and making the process much more lean. Taking out duplicated jobs that don't need to be in the system, were lying dormant in there because nobody really had the time to cleanse the data in the system and make it much more meaningful. So you go from 6,000 jobs to 3,600. It then becomes more manageable, and teams can see that they're getting somewhere with this process we're using. So the outcomes were to cleanse the data in the system, agree historic timelines. So we had some jobs going back to 2016 within the system. Now, I know estates can be accused of not being the most responsive at times, but I would like to think that we followed a job up that went in the job in 2016. And in actual fact, some of the buildings that those jobs were aligned to had actually been demolished as part of the Building the Leeds Way. So it gives you an insight of some of the sort of really easy things that we could do to improve the way people thought and worked around the system. And the monthly K2 performance data of open and closed submitted jobs from a reactive point of view, and the number of required PPMs in month, we started to see those figures coming down. And what was interesting in the planned maintenance, so the jobs we go out because we've got to do them, they fall under some legislation, what we found was those jobs remain the same, but our efficiency in able to do them in a more timely manner was what the improvement was there. It wasn't so much about reducing those number of jobs. The team wanted to do it and wanted to divert the resource to where it was needed. As I say, we had some examples where 3 different estates trades went to do one job. You look at some of our colleagues in the wider estates world outside of the trust who've come to work for us, really couldn't understand that. And that leads us to our workforce plan of multi-skilled tradespersons. And you know, it has an impact overall if we start to gain control of the work that we're doing. What would we do differently? I'm not sure, because one of the things that the team have fed back to me is they can see the way that we're moving forward on this is starting to have some tangible benefits. And whilst we've made a reduction of nearly 50% in some of the reactive jobs, we still know that there's more to do. At a very quick meeting this week in a progress report on this, just in a meeting of 15 minutes, we knocked 87 jobs off around pest control, telephones and other such things that people had put on the works management system by accident or because they weren't aware that that wasn't the process to report them in. The key learning, a whole time equivalent that's behind the computer that's monitoring this, probably at a band 2 or 3 level, will release our band 6 and 7 engineers to be out on site working and looking after the things that really keep the site going and being reactive around all the different pressures that we've got on site. The next step is to extend it to our engineering colleagues and further work on the PPM. Whilst we won't reduce the numbers on that, the backlog of PPM will reduce because we're being more efficient in the services. This is just a sort of paper copy of the post-it notes I referred to that we just summarised for colleagues to use as a thought process when we're doing this. And you'll see there that I've also included the annual commitments on there, because I know at least one exit interview that I did with a band 6 The reason that band 6 left was because he felt that the K2 system was tying him behind a desk too much, and he wasn't able to get out on site to understand where the valves were and where the pipes were and where all the things are that we need to turn off in an emergency, that I would really want my estates officers and managers doing, not sitting behind a computer managing this, because we've let it get out of control to a certain extent. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks for that, Peter. Last presentation again, really good. And I think what I've liked about all the presentations we've heard today has been, just some of the recognition that we all have workarounds that we just gradually accumulate, and until we take time to use some of the methodology like 5S or think about visual change, combined with that connectivity for frontline staff and getting them out and about, that ambition to change, I think, has really come through all of them. And you've all talked about having that flexible approach and getting our staff's input into what the change needs to look like, just recognizing that people doing the work know how to improve the work. So have we got any questions or comments for Lucy, Natalie, Alexandra or Peter?
How diverse, wasn't that great? Really, really liked the diversity, but equally, as you were saying, Phil, I liked the sort of the common things that they all had. So Alexandra, I loved the bit that you challenged, you recognised your mental valleys. I think we all struggle with that one. I thought that was brilliant. It made me smile. I guess the question though I've got for Natalie is, having seen such brilliant improvement, are we confident that the things that are in place, Natalie, will help it sustain? Because some of the time we sometimes see, and this is something we struggle with on sickness absence and all those sorts of things, we have a bit of a push on something, but then it starts to fade over time. So I was just interested in your thoughts on sustainability.
I think one of the biggest difficulties I've had with sustaining is the turnover of staff that we've had, and repeatedly during the training and getting them up to date with the paperwork that's there, which is why we are kind of doing joint sessions with those new staff, introducing it to them as much as possible. And the plan is to re-audit later this year to see how well it's been used. I do kind of go around every now and again, especially if I know we've got some trachea patients, and just have a quick look at the documentation. And it's great to see that without prompting, staff are going and picking up the documentation, they're filling it in regularly. I've been off for a week and a half, and I come back today and there's a Larry patient on the ward, and all the paperwork is there and it's being filled in, and it's brilliant to see that. So I definitely think that because the staff are seeing the benefit of it as well, and it's helping their confidence of knowing when they last did an inner tube change, when the last suction was done, they're keen to keep doing it because they can see the benefit.
Great, thanks for that, Natalie. Anybody else want to come in with any other thoughts?
Thanks, Phil. Just briefly acknowledge the effort from all these people on the Leeds Improvement Method Intermediate course. Maybe we need to revisit the scope of some of these projects, because you've been ambitious, but what brilliant outcomes, and good luck with next steps. I just think we're building some fantastic examples from the likes of yourselves, working with your teams on how this can really make a difference. So I love this report out. I love the fact that we're hearing such great stuff from people. So it's a big thank you from me, and just to check that we can share your examples, and I might be knocking on your door proverbially pretty soon, because this is the type of stuff we want to share beyond this forum so it reaches more folks. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. So we're pretty much out of time. So again, just to say to Lucy, Natalie, Alexandra, Pete, brilliant presentations. Thank you very much. Really inspiring to hear. And for everyone on the call, I think it just really illustrates that this isn't about complexity or huge transformation work. This is about just thinking about what the frontline experience of staff is, and what the opportunities they can give us in terms of how we can do those improvements. When we give people that kind of empowerment to take take improvements into their own hands. And I think it's really fantastic and inspiring to have heard all of those. So that's the end of this week's report out. Some contacts there on that slide. Next one will be in a couple of weeks. Obviously, as folk know, as we get into the summer months, we sometimes are a bit more flexible in how often we hold these, but otherwise we'll see you next time. Cheers. Bye.